I Never Recovered by Joshua Waggoner. I'm terrified of the dark, cripplingly so. The smallest dark corner makes me anxious. I can't sleep unless the whole room is brightly lit. But it wasn't always like this. In fact, it used to be the opposite. When I was a kid, I couldn't stand lights being on when I was trying to sleep. I'd even covered my bedroom windows to keep outside light out, because it bothered me so much. That all changed in a single night. My parents were both out late at a party, something to do with the company my mum worked for. So I was at home alone that night and would be for a while. It was going to be like any other night. I had just turned the hallway light off, closed the door to my bedroom, plugged my phone into charge, put it on my nightstand, and laid down to go to bed. If I wasn't already asleep at the time, I was pretty close when I heard a noise. The soft pop of a floorboard, it sounded like. Thinking it was probably just one I had stepped on earlier settling back into place, I didn't pay it much mind. Until the second pop. Now a little curious, I reached over and felt around for the phone on my nightstand. As I fumbled around in an attempt to turn the flashlight on, the light from the screen was just enough to illuminate a face. A strange, dark, opaque, indistinguishable face just inches from mine. In a panic, I tried to scream, but there wasn't anything in my lungs at the time. Just enough to cause a pitiful wheeze lost in the sounds of my phone, hitting the floor and turning off, leaving me stranded alone in the inky void of my room. All I could think to do was sit there on my bed, paralyzed from terror as my entire body trembled. Frozen, I struggled and fought to get my breath to slow down so I could hear where whatever was in my room with me was. Suddenly I heard another floorboard pop from the far corner of my room, spurring me to push myself far back against the wall behind my bed. Then I sat still, listening for anything to tell me where it might be. Briefly, the idea crossed my mind to run for the door and out into the hall, but I still didn't know where it was. What if it was right in front of the door and I ran straight into it? But what was going to happen if I just sat there horrified in the middle of a pitch-black room and didn't do anything? The real panic started to set in as my breath started to shorten, and I felt the tears begin to well up in my eyes. Then another pop, near the foot of my bed. But nothing else happened. I sat petrified, waiting for what came next for what felt like forever. I had started to relax. Was it just one of those night terror things you hear about? It was about the time I started trying to rationalize everything in my young mind that I felt the sheet under me as it was being pulled slowly from the other end of the bed, inch by inch, dragging me slowly along with it. In a sudden jolt of clarity, I crawled backwards towards the wall again, just as my sheet was violently snatched out from under me. At that point, I began sobbing loudly. Mama, please help. I wept to myself through my hands, which I was using to cover my mouth and muffle the sound as I sat there, trapped on my bed with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, alone in the dark with some thing. Another floorboard popped, then another, and another. It was walking straight towards me. Not even thinking, I reached for my nightstand, grabbing for the heaviest, hardest object I could find before slinging it in the direction of the noise. I listened as it bounced off the far wall and clattered to the floor in a loud racket. I sat there, quiet as I could manage to be over the sharp hiss of my breathing, listening for any sign. Then a voice spoke from under my bed. My voice. Mama, it said in a close but distorted impression of me. Mama, it spoke again a little louder. Please, it whispered. I was at a point beyond anything I could call fear by then. My mouth was dry and my eyes were burning from tears. I couldn't even feel my hands anymore. I think I was going into shock at the voice as it continued on and on. And then I felt the end of my bed sink down as something pressed onto it. It started climbing onto my bed, getting closer and closer as it chanted, louder and louder. Mama, Mama, please, please help, Mama, Mama, help, Mama, Mama. It was just a few inches from my face. I could feel its breath as it screamed over and over. I closed my eyes tight, not knowing what was about to happen. Then the faint sound of a rattling doorknob cut through the chaos, and everything went quiet and still as my door was flung open and the light from the hallway flooded the room. "What's wrong?" my mum shouted as she came running in, followed closely behind by my dad. I tried to explain what had happened, but they couldn't find anything in my room, and there was no sign of anyone being in there but me, except for the sheets and blankets lying on the floor. But they just assumed I kicked them off as I thrashed around from a bad dream. After a while of me refusing to be in the dark for any reason ever, they made me see a therapist. But that didn't work. Years of it didn't work. I never really recovered from that experience. It's even ruined my relationships. My insistence on sleeping in a brightly lit room. But I was still convinced of what had happened that night. And still, to this day, I am terrified of the dark. And now for a bonus story, also from Joshua Waggoner. Long After You're Gone. I've been here since the beginning of time, since the universe erupted out into the endless void and tore existence across nothingness. I was there. I have been here since the very reality you know congealed from a hell of energetic chaos, since the faint tangle of gravity began to give shape to the shapeless. I was there. I watched as the first star ignited, casting brilliant light into the darkness, and I stood next to it as its spark died out, sole witness to death casting its first shadow. I was there. I stood by as fiery giants fell and collapsed into inescapable monsters. I gazed down at planets as they cooled from the molten inferno of rock and iron. I sat in awe as the first life struggled into being in an unwelcoming world. I scowled in anger as that life, in almost the blink of an eye, looked up at me in defiance, resolved to endure against all odds. I lurked in the distance as this proud thing forged clever tools and mixed potent medicine determined to last. I loomed overhead as the cunning thing built towers to the sky and plummeted vessels into the depths, resolute to conquer. I have watched and observed as the thing which dragged itself out of the ocean flew into the sky and touched the moon to display its power. And I will continue to watch. I will watch you, You vile, proud, arrogant, insignificant little thing. I will watch as you burn your home to the ground. I will watch as you struggle to breathe the smoke-filled air. I will watch as you drink the polluted water. I will watch as you eat the rotting scraps you have left. I will watch as you suffer from the fruits of your own pride and your own greed. I will watch. I will watch even if some inconceivable act of defiance you pull yourself back from the edge of self-destruction. I will watch as the star that gives you life cremates your small blue rock. I will watch when you flee into the vastness of space, clawing and begging for any safe haven. I will watch as you take root and rebuild for a while. I will watch because after you have braved the eons, when you are huddled around the final few flames of the last remaining star, staring into oblivion, into the empty, lightless sky, I will be there just as I am and as I have always been. And I will watch as you pray in vain to a God who will not answer, as you plead for any glimmer of hope at the end. I will watch as the last spark of life fades into the dark, and I will be here long after you're gone, because all I have is time. All I am is time.